So as everyone knows, Path of Exile 2 was one of the most hyped games of this year, and everyone was eagerly waiting to get into the games themselves. I initially didn't really care about the game, since I only got into the ARPG genre with the release of D4, and we all know how that went out. So when my friends who religiously played PoE 1 were saying how this game is going to be the best game of the year, I was slowly but surely getting pulled into the hype, and now here I am with about 20 hours of game time in the first 2 days after release. And for someone who never played PoE before, I was faced with many difficult challenges in understanding what the fuck is even going on and what I was even supposed to do. It is an ARPG after all, so I wasn't completely lost, but if you go from a skill tree like this to something like this, oh boy. What the fuck is going on here? What do I do? Your head will most likely explode. So while I'm showing you my journey to becoming addicted to this game in less than 48 hours, I will also give you my thoughts about the game, the positives and the negatives. And just so you guys know beforehand, I won't spoil anything of the story in this video and will only show you stuff from the first 2 acts of the game. Additionally, I will be comparing the game to Diablo 4 a lot, since that's the only ARPG that I really played before jumping into PoE 2. So with that out of the way, let's hop right in. My journey began where everybody's journey on a release day begins, in the queue. After around 2 hours of delay and an additional hour of queuing, I was finally in game and created my own character. 1 hour of waiting later, I was finally allowed to create my... Well, anyway, I made it into the game as Caesar the Sorcerer, and honestly, the servers didn't lag at all, and everything went smooth once the GGG got their server stabilized and up and running. Now before I talk about the actual gameplay, I have to say that I love the newly added WASD movements. I always found it annoying to use your mouse for walking and attacking, which just makes kiting and such much more annoying for me. The beginning was fairly simple, since you followed a set path and only had one skill, which I realized is bound to the weapon you have equipped. After a few minutes, I also already got my second spell out of a chest, Spark, which launches many little lightning projectiles that bounce off of walls and deal damage once they hit an enemy. This moment right here is also where you as a player learn about the gem system in the game. Gems are basically your spells which you can empower or modify by adding additional support gems onto them, making them deal more damage, change the elemental damage type, or make them bigger or smaller, however you want. You get these gems by just playing the game. So nothing here is really locked behind your level as far as I can tell. They drop from bosses, random mobs, chests, vases, quests, basically everything, which felt very nice to be honest. This brings me to one of many positive aspects of the game, the diversity and the customizability of your own character. Although there is no real character creation with different hairstyles and eye colors and so on, you can create a completely personalized build who no one else did before you, since you also have access to every spell in the game regardless of the class you pick at the beginning. You want to be a spellcasting monk, a fire-wielding warrior, you can create your very own class and play however you want. I mean, it probably won't be as good as highly thought out builds, but you can do it. And that gives you a sense of freedom if you have all these options free for you. And for people like me, experimenting with all those spells and cooking up something for your own playstyle makes it a very enjoyable experience. Once I got my first gem, I was able to choose one spell out of a few to engrave onto the gem in order for me to learn that spell. What I saw here was fascinating honestly, since no game I played before had this feature, and although it is such a simple idea, it changed my view on it completely. You actually have in-game video sources of how the spells look and what they do, which I love. It's so refreshing to not need to go on YouTube and look up what the spells do yourselves. Additionally, they also added voiceovers of what the spells actually do, giving you more information about the spell and potentially making the game more accessible for certain audiences. Now, as I mentioned in the intro of this video, I had only played Diablo 4 before, so I was expecting this game to be as brain-dead of a button-mashing one-shotting game as Diablo. But the bloated Miller, the boss of the tutorial island, gave me a wake-up call. Although PoE 2 looked like an ARPG at first, it now felt like a top-down version of Dark Souls. This guy and all the mobs and bosses after that had actual mechanics you had to acknowledge if you didn't want to die. What I struggled with the most at the beginning were those guys that wield a shield like 2 hours into the game who reflect any projectile you shoot at them. You can imagine how my first encounter went after I decided to blast a fully charged Ember Fusillade at them. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that this game has so many different mobs and mob types with different abilities and mechanics, each tied to individual zones, which are also so different from each other, giving off completely different vibes, thus making the game feel much more alive and diverse. If I'm going to be honest here, I think PoE 2's first act has more mob diversity than the whole Diablo franchise, not counting the bosses obviously, which is insane in my opinion if you think about it. You never get complacent in a zone, since in every corner there was a different mob waiting for you with different mechanics you had to dodge and work with, which felt very nice, and I never felt any kind of boredom like I did after a while in D4. Now, additionally, although the Dark Souls series is one of my favorite franchises of all time, I have to say that the difficulty in PoE 2 at some points just feel unfair. You can play out of your mind, like Faker in his prime, but if you get hit by that one spell you can't even see because your whole screen is on fire, you just die instantly, no matter how much HP you have left. I don't even think the difficulty is the problem most of the time, but rather the screen cluster you just naturally create by playing the game. I don't know how other classes feel or look like while playing the game, but if I put down 2 flame walls and a fire orb, my whole screen is basically filled up with fire, and there's really no chance of seeing a quick projectile flying towards me. Once I made my way to these fields, I also realized that this game has one pretty big flaw. As I mentioned, I like the zone and enemy design, but the maps are just too big. I noticed while playing that sometimes you just get lost in these zones and keep on going and going and going, losing track of your goal since you just turn off your brain at some point. It just feels like you're wasting a lot of time doing nothing productive, since this game isn't open world like Diablo, so there aren't any side tracks you can take or enter a dungeon on your way to the main objective. And the worst feeling of all is that if you die at the end of a zone and you never picked up or saw a checkpoint, you would have to redo everything all over again, since mobs and bosses respawn if you die. These maps just feel empty, and I think a good way of fixing this issue would be to reduce the map sizes by like 30 to 40%. That way you don't feel like you're going on a pilgrimage to pick up a single item. And another pretty annoying thing, please make the dodge roll be able to go through enemies. I can't tell you how often I died close to the end of a zone because I got swarmed by mobs from all directions and suddenly got trapped between them all, forcing me to watch me die. It just feels bad, and making your dodge roll be able to go through enemies would make this experience literally vanish, and I don't even think it would hurt the game in any way. All in all, I can say that this game is definitely very fun and challenging. So if you still don't know if you want to buy the game or not, keep in mind that this game feels nothing like a traditional ARPG, and it can be very difficult at times, at least in early game. Regardless of the difficulty, it is also pretty beginner friendly. I can't remember a moment where I felt lost on what to do, and even the skill tree, as daunting as it may look at first, isn't as complicated as it seems, since you can only start at one specific point depending on your class, effectively reducing the size of the talent tree by a large margin. The only negatives I mentioned in this video and came across while playing the game are all points that can be fixed very easily by reducing the size of zones and changing up how the dodge roll works. Other than that, the game is very fun and very polished for an early access title of today's time. Is it better than D4? Yes, not even close. But I also think that these two games speak to different types of gamers. On one side are the people that just want their traditional ARPG gameplay with an OP build running past every mob and killing them in a single frame. On the other side are the people that also love ARPGs but want the challenging aspects of games like Elden Ring. Is it perfect? Not yet, but I'm pretty sure the developers are on track to make this game a generational masterpiece if they keep on delivering, which, if you look at their past, always have. Obviously, this all could just be a whole lot of yapping, since I'm basically in the early game and everything could change or feel different once I hit endgame, or create a better build, but for someone who never played PoE before, these first impressions can and will impact whether or not they will continue to play or not. I would really like to know what you PoE veterans think of the game. Do you agree or disagree with me? Let's talk about it in the comments. And while you're down there, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. That way I know if you guys want to see more of my PoE journey. Anyways, I wish you guys a great day and have fun in Path of Exile 2.